Hello and welcome to this latest episode of the Women in Defence and National Security Network's profile series. And this is where we talk to women all over the defence and national security world about their experiences, their career experiences, how they got there, and where they think that the debate about women, national security and career should be going. So today I am talking to Gill Savage. She is the Deputy Director of ASPI's Professional Development Centre and also a Senior Fellow in ASPI's Northern Australia Strategic Policy Centre. Prior to joining ASPI, Gill was a Senior Executive in the Australian Public Service and she's worked across a whole bunch of different areas, from national security, border protection, defence and strategic policy. Gill has extensive experience in business as well, and people strategy, organisational capability and digital transformation. We're delighted to have her today to speak with us. Welcome, Gill.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So let's start off with talking about your particular career path. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got from a university graduate to where you are now? Did you expect to be here? Was that something you imagined?
No, look, when I look back on my career, I didn't really expect to have done half of the things that I have done. And, going way back when, I started as a botanical researcher, working at the Australian National Botanic Garden. So that was my first government job. I don't think I was a particularly good researcher, but, that probably explains why I didn't stay. And then I went into environmental policy and programs. And I was working on things like climate change, mitigation and response, cleaner industries, clean technologies, all really relevant still today. Yes. And then evolved my policy and program work into defence, national security, border security. It's been a bit of a journey, and I think that's probably one of the things that is important to appreciate, that careers are journeys and they take you in all sorts of different directions.
So one question is, when did you think that you really wanted to have a leadership position or go for a leadership position?
So I think for me it was always about having an impact, and I thought that every role I did at whatever level it was, I could have a big impact, but then I would see that there's probably a bigger impact that I could have if I was in a different role or at a different level. And I think that just, drove me, and, it was always about doing something that was different, that was going to be positive, that was good for Australia, that was good for the community.
So looking at the metrics about women's leadership across the public service, they've kind of either flatlined or in some cases gone a little bit backwards. And you've held some very high profile leadership positions across the sector as well. How can women leaders help other women to get where you guys have gone?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. If I go back to the beginning, there was this sense when I was young that women had to experience all those bad things that the previous generation of women experienced, and there was quite a strong sense of that, and it was almost like it will be good for you. You'll be better. You'll be a better person if you do this. And I never quite understood that, and so for me, it's always been about making sure that they didn't have to experience the stupid things that I experienced, or the things that didn't make sense. And so I think that's one of the really, if you can internalise that, if you can really take that as a personal part of your journey to get those things out of the way, then those who follow will be able to focus on other things and better things. So for me, I think it creates a bit of a foundation or a platform that you can keep moving from and moving up.
How do you do that, Gill, in practice, where you have to balance the needs of both your male and female staff in a relatively equal kind of a manner? How can you really help women in particular, especially if you're in a workplace culture which doesn't see that women have particular challenges?
Yeah, I think, it's an interesting one. I'm not saying that you should favour, but one of the really encouraging things I find now is that younger men in particular are highlighting challenges and are actually saying those gender challenges shouldn't be there, and are working within their own workplaces. So that makes it a lot easier to point the finger and say, let's change this or let's move on. You are right that things have flatlined a little bit. I think we've come a long way, but there has been a little bit of a slowing down. And just this week I heard some stats around ASX 200 companies, and that we've got about 33% plus representation of females on ASX 200 boards. But what's interesting, and so they're corporates, what's interesting with that is that the pipeline of potential female leaders in those organisations has diminished. So while we've got this really good, growing board representation within corporates in Australia, that's not growing. And so there's still an issue and there's still a challenge to work out why, and then to resolve that.
What do you think are some of the reasons that might be happening?
Well, again, if I go back to when I first went into the workplace, people would do and say all sorts of things, and they were probably not harmful and hurtful. It was just the way it was. I think people have learned they can't do and say those things now, but I don't know necessarily that those older people in senior positions really understand why it's not appropriate and why we should have gender equality in our workplaces. So until that happens, I really don't think that we'll make much progress, because those people are still in senior roles. They're making decisions that are generally, if they're not engaging with diversity, they're making decisions that are generally discriminatory, and it's pretty unpopular to call that out, but they're also doing it in a less overt, more covert way as well, because they know that if they say certain things, people will bounce and jump on them and say that's not appropriate. So you can't stop me thinking that way, and you can't stop me making judgments and decisions that are not in line with embracing diversity outcome. So
things have gone underground and therefore a little bit hard to identify and also to deal with for women facing those kinds of challenges.
Yeah, and it's not specific, it's not overt, and it's really hard to pinpoint. So I think that's one of the challenges. It is a journey, and we have come a really long way. And when I first started in the workplace, so before I went into public service, I was working in a private company, and I had men working for me who earned more. And I remember one day I had to give a man a pay rise. And so, being young and sort of not realising boundaries, I go and knock on the managing director's door and ask why. And I'm not kidding, this person said, well, I don't understand why we're having this conversation, because this person has a wife and child to support. You don't. And it was like, well, so no one would ever say that today.
No.
And, I'd like to think people wouldn't do that kind of thing as overtly today. So we have come a long way. So, we just have to keep chipping away at this and showing people a better way.
So for some of those people from, perhaps a different age with different workplace cultures, what would you say to them about why equality in the workplace is so important? How does an organisation suffer when it doesn't have it?
So for me, I think there are three levels around this. The first level is this basic human connection with people. It's about respecting and empowering people. The second benefit that comes from equality in the workplace is performance of your organisation, whether it's your team, your section, or the whole organisation, and potentially into cross-sectoral benefits. And then the third level is really the big one, and I think that is about benefits to the nation, benefits to the community that derive from a gender embracing, equality embracing world. I think we're stuck in the first level, edging still into the second level. So I think people translate it into being polite and being nice to individuals, and I think we're not really pushing and driving that bigger benefit. If you don't understand that, if you don't believe that, then you're not going to change your behaviour. And I think a lot of people do understand and believe, and that's why we've got so much focus at the moment on those sorts of things. But, unless those in real decision-making positions understand it and embrace it and are overt with it, it will take some time still for things to change.
So on that note of things taking time to change, of course, over the last couple of years, we've seen big movements both globally and in Australia that are looking at women's empowerment. And I'm thinking specifically around issues of sexual assault in the workplace. So the Brittany Higgins stuff that's happened. Also, this is the era of Me Too, #MeToo. So this is a much more volatile kind of debate and background that we're operating in terms of looking at some of these issues of gender equality in the workplace. Do you think it just makes it harder, or have these movements really just push these particular challenges for women into a place that we can no longer ignore them?
Look, I think it's brought them out into the open. I think the problem is that those extreme circumstances don't resonate for ordinary people. They sort of don't see the connection between what might be small gender-based biases and a sexual assault. Okay, so and they don't see the sort of the continuum that those things are on. And so the problem is that sort of says, well, that's here, that's over there, that's not here, and we don't have anything like that, so we're okay. So I think that's the really sort of challenging thing about some of those examples. They absolutely have to be brought out into the open, and it's really important that they're done. But we also need to make sure that people don't see them as extreme examples that could never happen in their workplace. Just because you don't know about them doesn't necessarily mean. And the other thing about organisations, the way we run our organisations now, we are safeguarding privacy of individuals. So I've had Chief Operating Officer roles in the public sector a couple of times. And it's really important to safeguard the privacy of all the individuals that are involved in any concern in the workplace. The challenge with that is that people don't know things go on in their own workplace. So it's not the subject of gossip. People don't do that sort of engagement anymore, which is a good thing, but then you just don't know. So only some people know what's happening to that extent. And as we saw with the Brittany Higgins example, a lot of people did actually know along the way, but the workplace didn't understand or didn't know because we were keeping things private. For the benefit of the individuals concerned. I think all the individuals concerned. So that's always a challenge. And I'm not suggesting that we change that, but it does mean it does create some difficulties in people understanding what's really going on in their own organisation.
So just As a final question, how do young women have these conversations in the workplace about both those kinds of Me Too issues, but also about how do I become a leader? How do I get mentored? How do I deal with the challenges that still exist for me as a woman in the workplace?
Look, I think you need to have people on your side. I think you need to have people who will help you work out the how. It's up to you to work out the what. You've got a bit of a journey. You want to achieve certain things. Surround yourself with at least one person, whether it's at work or whether it's home, who can help you work out and work through the journey of all of that. So they're not making the decision for you, but they're also there to take barriers away, and those barriers might even be on your own thinking around what's possible. So I think that's one important thing. I think conversations in the workplace about all sorts of sensitive and difficult and challenging issues. And, we can use examples that are in the public domain. We don't have to talk about what's happening in our own organisation. But I think the conversation is really important. And it's okay for people to be uncomfortable about those conversations. If they're not uncomfortable, then it means we're not engaging with anything that's different. So I think there is a bit of a sense that difficult conversations in the workplace are things we should shy away from. But when they're in the public domain, let's talk about them. Let's see how people feel and think. And that's a really interesting way to highlight some different views and potentially some things that you can work through in a practical way in your particular workplace.
Jill, I wish we had a lot more time to dig into your experiences as a woman and a leader in the national security space, but we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and last words, don't give up, just keep on going.
Fantastic.
Thank you.